Welcome back to Into the Cosmos. This video will cover everything about James Webb that we know so far. First off, what is James Webb? The James Webb Space Telescope is NASA and the European Space Agency's next-generation space telescope. This telescope is an infrared telescope that requires a special orbit and sun shield. The telescope is named after James Webb, who was the NASA administrator who oversaw the Mercury, Gemini, and the very beginning of the Apollo program. He oversaw every Mercury and Gemini flight as well as the Apollo 1 fire under the Johnson administration. Next, why even build the telescope? This telescope began as a replacement for the Hubble Space Telescope, but has become so much more. The telescope will aid in the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, or SETI, and it will do this by being able to tell the difference between natural light, such as sunlight or bioluminescence, and artificial light, like LEDs and fluorescent lights. It will also be able to see the first galaxies formed billions of years ago. Due to redshift, the light from the oldest galaxies is only visible in the infrared spectrum. This is where James Webb Space Telescope comes in. Because it is an infrared telescope, it can see the light from those ancient galaxies. How will James Webb work? James Webb will use both near and mid-infrared sensors as well as specially developed mirrors to collect its data. James Webb also has other experiments on board, such as spectrographs and chronographs. The spectrographs break light into its base colors for analysis, and the spectrographs block starlight so that the planets orbiting it can be observed. There's one experiment named MIRI that allows spectrograph, chronographs, and cameras to operate using mid-range infrared. The only problem with MIRI is that it can only operate in sub-7 degree Kelvin. To allow the system to operate, James Webb has cryocoolers that get cold enough for the MIRI systems to operate properly. When will James Webb begin operation? It will be launching on December 25th at 7:20 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. This is the launch that people have been waiting for over 2 decades. NASA announced their, quote, next-generation space telescope in 1996. Later in 2000, the tech demo for James Webb named Nexus was cancelled, meaning that James Webb would have to get it right. The telescope, named in 2002, and was named James Webb in 2002. In 2011, James Webb was threatened with cancellation but survived. In 2015, they had fully assembled the primary mirror, and in December of that year, the contract was signed with Arianespace to launch James Webb in October of 2018. As you can tell, there were some significant delays. Many of these delays came from testing. In November 2016, construction was complete and the telescope was ready for testing. The first delay came when they began vibration testing and James Webb experienced an anomaly. After this, NASA reported the new launch date was no earlier than May 2020. After that, launch date was pushed back to at least March 2021 after the recommendation of an independent review board. After this, launch was delayed again to at least October 31st, 2021 due to the impact of the coronavirus pandemic. After that, launch was delayed to at least November 2021 due to the concerns of launch site readiness. After that, the launch was delayed to December 22nd, 2021 after an unplanned release of a clamp sent a vibration through the whole telescope, and NASA required a brief testing campaign to ensure the telescope was not damaged. Now, the most recent delay was on December 14th when the launch was delayed to December 24th due to a communication issue between the observatory and the launch vehicle. After that, the final delay was from December 24th to 25th due to weather concerns. Where will James Webb Telescope launch from and orbit at? James Webb will be launched on an Ariane 5 from the Guiana Space Center in French Guiana. After launch, James Webb will enter a roughly 30-day coast phase until it reaches the L2 Lagrange point roughly 1 million miles from Earth. During the coast phase, James Webb will begin to deploy its various parts that were folded up for the launch. First thing to deploy will be the solar panels. After some course correction burns, the sun shield will begin to deploy. Once the sun shield is fully deployed and tensioned, The secondary mirror will deploy. Once that is done, the radiators deploy so that the telescope doesn't overheat. The final thing that will deploy are the port and starboard wings of the primary mirror, and the final mirror adjustments to the individual mirror segments so that they reflect the light perfectly into the secondary mirror. And the absolute final thing before operation is the L2 injection burn. Once that is complete, James Webb will be orbiting in the L2 orbit. Once there, a 6-month testing campaign will begin, so that in mid to late 2022, the telescope will be in full operation. Who's behind James Webb? James Webb was built by NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center, and for this mission, NASA also partnered with the European Space Agency and the Canadian Space Agency. NASA also partnered with over 300 companies all over the world to build this telescope. The engineering behind James Webb is very complex for a number of reasons. First of these reasons is the telescope, quote, sees in infrared. This is challenging because anything with heat gives off infrared. This problem is solved by the use of a multi-layer sun shield and the orbit it is in. The orbit it will be in is the L2 Lagrange point that makes it so that it can point the sun shield at the sun and also block the Earth and Moon. The second engineering issue also stems from the telescope operating in the infrared wavelength. Normal mirrors that operate in the visible spectrum get their reflectivity from a silver-like material. The problem is that the silver-like material cannot reflect infrared very well. This is why the James Webb mirrors are coated in a very thin layer of gold. This layer is so thin that approximately 48.5 grams of gold to coat the entire 25 square meter mirror. One problem that they had to deal with is the telescope is so far away that, unlike Hubble, it's completely unserviceable. That could lead to complete mission failure. Unlike most NASA missions, there are multiple single points of failure on this telescope. There are over 300 pins that hold the sun shield in place for launch, and if even one of those pins doesn't release, the sun shield would be unable to deploy. Another point failure is the mirror tiles. If their alignment motors fail, and the mirrors are unable to adjust their focal point, they will not be able to get any usable images from the telescope. So as you can see, for the telescope to work correctly, the mission needs to go near flawlessly. The T-0 is scheduled for 7:20 a.m. on December 25th, 2021. A quick timeline of events leading up to launch. On December 23rd, the final assembly bay doors were opened and the Ariane 5 was rolled out to the pad. At 7:20 a.m. December 25th, we will see an Ariane 5 lift off with the James Webb telescope. At T plus 27 minutes, James Webb is released from the upper stage of the Ariane 5 to fly on its own in a stowed state. T plus 33 minutes, the solar array unfolds to supply the telescope with power to operate communications and propulsion. T plus 1 day, the antenna deploys, allowing communication with the ground. At T plus 3 days, the sun shield begins deployment by lowering the forward and aft pallets. At T plus 6 days, the port and starboard mid-booms deploy to allow the sun shield to fully deploy. The sun shield begins tensioning at T plus 7 days and is complete by T plus 8 days. At T plus 10 days, the secondary mirrors fold into place. At T plus 11 days, the radiator deploys to allow at T plus 12 and 13 days for the wings of the primary mirror to deploy. One of the final things for Webb to do before operation is for the individual mirrors to adjust themselves to have their focal point at the secondary mirror. Once that is done, it is time for James Webb to perform the L2 injection burn. At that point, it will be able to be in full operation.